Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities and Miniatures, and it's Friday once more when this was first posted, which means I bring to you yet another obscurity in literature. Now, this is a treat today for me. Number one, because it's another piece of Druillet work, as well as James Cawthorn, who did a bunch of Michael Moorcock work. But it's also another Elric book. And unfortunately, my Elric books are stuck in Japan, at least as of the time of this filming. And no thanks to our pandemic, but I have not been able to get a hold of them for the last 2 years. I have a stash of fantasy novels tucked away in my in-laws' house in Japan. And so whenever we go there, I love to peruse them, and when I actually have some free time to read, that's what I enjoy doing there. And I originally read Stormbringer and a lot of the early works before. I'm assuming it's the revised, reworked, chronological set of books that Moorcock put out later on. I know it's like the big collection that had like a Michael Kaluta cover on it. But those have been sitting over there for a while, and I first read them when my kids were really little. I had started it in the winter one year. I remember sitting there by the little gas burner reading them and just marveling at how much was directly inspired and lifted in early Games Workshop stuff. Just the concepts of chaos, the 8-arrowed path, and all that. It's all here, and I never knew that. I knew it was a big literary influence on a lot of, fantasy works of the 70s and 80s. Just I never knew how much it heavily permeated the actual Games Workshop background lore back in the day. So cover-wise, we've got a nice colored Druillet piece here. Druillet's one of those artists that I'd always wanted to get into, but it was really, really hard to get his stuff for a reasonable price, at least for a dumb young kid pre-internet years. And just the amount of stuff at this point that Titan has put out, not only we've got a bunch of the actual Moorcock books, but then just all of the various graphic novels as well that they've been putting out. Very cool stuff. So as you can see, James Cawthorn, and then we have basically what's an unfinished section of the Elric saga. Introduction by Moorcock and Druillet. Obviously, Cawthorn isn't around with us anymore, so that's not possible. And this is just absolute, pure 70s fantasy, explosion, for lack of a better term. There's not a lot of those hard and fast, set-in-stone rules that you tend to see these days. And I've always likened Cawthorn. Is it Cawthorn? I want to say Hawthorne. No, it is Cawthorn. Never mind. Okay, I'm right. Anyway, I've always likened Cawthorn's stuff to Bernie Wrightson, with the heavily crossed hatch, the line work like it is. If you're familiar with Wrightson's Frankenstein, I read that as a young teen. A lot of people looked at me like, why are you getting into this? But yeah, I was really down with Wrightson back in the 90s when he was still with us. Actually, I've got a bunch of signed books by him, no less. But yeah, the background work especially really gives me a Wrightson vibe. And you can see already we've got the 8-fold path right there. Looks familiar. And I love these big double-page spreads because I can only imagine just how large he was working at the time. Funny enough, this story, while as wordy as it is, I think you really need to have at least quick perusal skimming of the original Elric books to really understand. There's characters in this that I'm like, I don't remember these people. I kind of remember him and his wife being kidnapped and having to go off to the land of the sorcerers or whatever it was called. Oh, what was it called? Like Pantang or something like that. I honestly cannot remember. And I just read it the other day too, and I'm trying to figure out what was. And then that's one thing that's really always I've had a hard time with Moorcock stuff is the names. There's just so many consonants and vowels thrown in there. It just I lose track of who's who. I honestly and truly do, which is funny. I'll read Japanese or translated Chinese works and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But then Moorcock stuff, it's what? It's kind of bad. Where is it? Pantang. I was right. He has to go slay the theocrats. I remember that. But then they get into like the weird dukes of hell and the servitors of chaos that are hanging around in the land of the sorcerers. Fun stuff. And it's funny, like, you always see these little tiny silhouettes of Elric and Moonglum or whoever's with him at the time, his cousin, whose name always escapes me. I'm assuming this is the part where they tie him to the mast, but there's like no real mention of it. Jagreem Learn, that's his name. The main sorcerer. Like, there's a part where he almost kills Elric and lets him go, but there's no real explanation why. They get into, Stormbringer and Mournblade. The Melnibone Emperor's armor. It just kind of gets like a real, just cursory glance. And again, I think if you haven't read the books, you would totally be lost. If you're familiar with the novels, I think this is probably a fun little read. And again, we have the shield that they use. And then there's like, when the Chaos ships arrive, as they're like mutating and distorting the land as they, come across the world, and everything's just going to hell. And, when they summon up, what's his name? I can't think of his name. Why can't I think? I'm like looking around here trying to find his name. It's one of the gods that Elric worships, and I can't think of his name. I remember the horn that he has to get to awaken the dragons of Melnibone, who come and toast everything in the land of chaos. Well, no, we're getting too early. That's where we get the land of chaos. Look at this. Yeah, I don't know where this might have influenced some other people. It's kind of cool seeing where the origins of Warhammer lie, and they absolutely do lie very squarely on the shoulders of Michael Moorcock and Kevin O'Neill and Pat Mills and many other authors. You even have, Zionbarg, who is like the hermaphroditic, god of lust or whatever, as a male and presents female and gets wiped out. His corporeal body, at least, gets wiped out by Stormbringer, and then as the gods of law come into the mortal realm and have their huge epic battle with the gods of chaos. Fun stuff. I can remember sitting there on the couch, I could not put this book down, at least the original novels, when I was reading them years ago, and it was freezing cold in the middle of the night, and I could hear the snow falling, sitting there by the little gas heater. I had to finish the book. Some of the panels look a little rough to me, but then some of them, I don't know, it kind of adds to the ambiance. You didn't have as, super slick and polished work as you do these days. And of course, with Stormbringer and his ultimate triumph, which, if you're familiar with the story, we'll let that sit with you. Then we have in the back an unfinished Druillet section, which is kind of cool. Now, funny enough, there is a lot of Elric that kind of is in Druillet's work, especially his early stuff. You can see elements of it in Lone Sloan, with the whole word that he gets to defend the galaxy. But man, if that artwork isn't evocative, I don't know what to tell you. Now, a lot of the stuff in this, now there's one panel in particular, and I was saving it for another day to talk about, is some of this stuff is absolutely, even looks like Sloan in some of these panels. But some of this stuff did end up in some of Druillet's other works. Was it Ygriel and the Mad? I know those two ended up in a book together, at least in English. I always love the architecture in Druillet's work. Now, some panels are like absolutely devoid of it, like this one right here, and then he just goes hog wild with all of that. I mean, it's just minuscule little, like, Kentaro Miura, just let's throw in every little possible thing that we can to make this page more interesting. Like, The illustrations don't really have a whole lot even to do with what's going on here, but they look really cool. For as decadent as Melnibone was supposed to be, it just doesn't feel it. You have very intricate and ornate artwork, though. Like, this panel right here, to me, feels like it's just, he wanted an excuse to draw a bunch of interesting, weird-looking people. And they are supposed to be humans still, or at least what passes for humans in the age of the Melnibone and Elric. Masks were supposed to be in season, I guess, in the capital. And then we have the panel that was used for the cover. Very cool looking artwork. So we have Elric and his lady. And his cousin, whose name escapes me. But again, you have like these overtly magnificent looking panels. And again, like Cawthorn, just tiny little silhouettes. Because really the background and the elegance and opulence kind of overtake the art and the characters. I swear to God, this panel's in another book of his. I swear to God it is. And I think, you know what? Actually, I know it is. Because in the back of the book, they have where it comes from in Ygriel. I think it's Ygriel. Yragale. Yragale? I don't know. Le Site qui rêvait. I don't know what. City of Dreams? Anyway, so this is an unfinished work. I'm going to save the very 70s Let's Get It On type artwork that starts showing up in it. You have like that whole cosmic horror element. Very much vibing with both Druillet's art and with the overall story. And then we get into a quick little history in the back of the book about the illustrators that have taken their shots at Elric, the one that always comes to my mind, P. Craig Russell's stuff. Simonson, I know, did it as well. I don't think I ever read it, and this is pretty recent stuff. I kind of remember when it came out. I'm kind of curious to see it now, actually, and he did some of the Multiverse books as well. The Multiverse, if I remember, was a longer series that was divided into like 3 chunks that like 3 different artists did or something along those lines. I don't think I've read any of those, though. Curious to see them. So a cool little look back in time. Some of the various Elric books that Titan has republished. I don't think I was going to say I don't think they're in hardcover, but you know what? I could be wrong, and I don't want to say that they aren't, because I think they are. And I know that my Hawkmoon books are. So, one of these days, this is the one I really want to get. I really want Quorum, because at least with the first volume, you have Mike Mignola doing the artwork. And, well, it's early Mignola, but it still looks cool nonetheless. So, a fun little trip down yesteryears of comics history, but definitely a fun one, especially if you are familiar with Elric and his saga, or just Moorcock's writing in general, or if you like old graphic novels, because, I mean, honestly, the Cawthorn stuff here at the beginning, while it is a very truncated version of the story, it does hit most of the major beats that occur within it, but it is a very kind of rough 70s style graphic novel. It doesn't have a lot of the modern elegance and fanciness that you would find in a dedicated graphic novel, I guess. But then again, these days graphic novels run on for hundreds of pages or multi-volumes of 40 to 60 pages as well. So, you know, this is kind of a more original thing back when it was first released. Definitely a lot more novel in its execution. So, anyway, if you're curious about this, I'm going to put a link down to Titan's website as well. If you want to take a look, they have been putting out some interesting stuff. Number one, the fact that this is in a big, massive book, I really dig. It's almost as big as my Wicca by Olivier Ledroy, who absolutely love, but I do appreciate the fact that Titan's putting this stuff out in the first place. Somebody's got to do it, and I'm glad that somebody is, because I know, at least with their Druillet books, it's been super hard to get that stuff for a reasonable price in English, so I do appreciate the fact that this is even existing and is on my shelf now, so cool beans there. With that said, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye.